Now it's time for Newsmakers, our look behind the headlines, and joining me here in the studio is David McKnight, who's Senior Research Fellow at the Journalism and Media Research Centre at the University of New South Wales, and Kate Carnell, who's the Chief Executive of the Australian Food and Grocery Council, and of course former ACT Chief Minister. Thanks very much to both of you for coming in today. First, to the debate taking place in Parliament over our presence in Afghanistan. Let's first hear what Prime Minister Julia Gillard, the opposition leader Tony Abbott and Independent MP Andrew Wilkie have had to say.
Australia will not abandon Afghanistan, but we must be very realistic about the future. Transition will take some years. We will be engaged through this decade at least. Good government in the country may be the work of an Afghan generation. There will be many hard days ahead.
The opposition supports the Australian government's commitment to Afghanistan and the Western commitment more generally.
You died serving your country, and I salute you. You died serving your country, and I salute you. May you rest in peace. And may my new colleagues in this place see the sense in ending this now, before too many more young Australians are sent to their deaths. Thank you.
It's a very emotional Andrew Wilkie there, and I think we sometimes forget the emotion of the debate, particularly when we see things going on in Parliament. But if I can ask you first, Kate Carnell, what have you learnt from this debate and what do you think has emerged from it?
Well, I think the thing that we've all learnt is just how long our commitment in Afghanistan is going to be. I don't think too many of us have really got our heads around the fact that this is a very, very long commitment. I'd have to say from a personal perspective, I just hope we start focusing lots more on giving the people of Afghanistan a future. As you may know, I've been involved in the drug law reform debate over a lot of years, and quite seriously, unless we give those farmers something else to grow other than opium poppies, maybe the deaths, but different sorts of deaths will continue.
We don't tend to think of opium and drugs being part of the overall solution in Afghanistan, do we?
But we should, because a whole lot of the money that is generated out of Afghanistan and the support that exists for a whole range of, of the groups, the Taliban and so on, comes from that source of that sort of dollars, that source of dollars. So we have to focus on what the Afghan people are going to do in the longer term to feed their families. If we are going to make this war, I suppose, come to anything like a reasonable conclusion.
David McKnight, has the debate told you anything that you don't already know?
I guess not, but in a way it's forced me to think through what I think. And what I think, well, I was very surprised by the decade-long commitment that we apparently have. I mean, my main concern is that we don't leave the very decent Afghanis in the lurch. Some say, let's get out now. And I've never been happy. You can't go into a country like that, and I supported the original commitment, and then just walk out. Leaving, the whole of Kabul to be taken over by the Taliban. That would be monstrous.
I guess a lot of the debate is focusing on what our troops are doing in terms of them helping the Afghan army develop. But a lot of people feel that we should be adopting a less intrusive, perhaps a more grassroots approach to helping the country. Kate Carnell, do you have a view on that?
Well, look, we've got to help the army and the police and so on set the infrastructure that the country will need for the future, for a democratic future. There's no doubt we've got to do that. But as I've said, looking at what the people of Afghanistan are going to do into the future, what their crops look like, how they're going to make a quid for their families, is pretty fundamental, isn't it? This is a country that's been engulfed in war for so long. To give them a future, they've got to have a solid economy.
David McKnight, is there a concern that we'll come to a stage, say, perhaps 5 years' time, just pulling a figure out of the air, and say to ourselves, it's all becoming too hard, and then somehow make an extraction of our troops there, even when the problem hasn't been completely solved, as is what happened in Iraq to a large extent?
Well, this is what I think would be quite immoral. The most hopeful sign, I think, is the fact that people are now saying more openly, well, we do have to talk to the Taliban. These kinds of wars can't end any other way, it seems to me. I don't think there'll ever be a military victory from the West side. And obviously the Taliban are not going to win militarily, so there has to be some sort of negotiated conclusion. Even Alexander Downer has said that, although he didn't say many things like that when he was in government.
Yeah. All right, let's change topics. In the United Kingdom this week, an American charity has paid for a vasectomy for a drug addict. The US-based charity, Project Prevention, says addicts are not fit to breed and is offering about $300 in exchange for sterilisation. Founder Barbara Harris, a middle-aged American woman, is now trawling the streets of North London looking for volunteers. Let's hear what she's had to say.
We offer drug addicts and alcoholics cash incentive of £200 if they'll use long-term birth control. If you truly believe that these women have a right to continue to have children, then step up, get in line, and adopt the next one born.
It was something that I'd been thinking about for a long time, and something that I'd already sort of made my mind up what I wanted to do, but just hadn't got round to it.
David McKnight, what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's probably pretty ethically dubious, as a number of people have said. I think addicts are pretty vulnerable, and to offer money for sterilisation, I mean, sterilisation can be reversed, but it's a pretty big decision. Someone who's an addict at 21 is not necessarily an addict at 31, but if they've been sterilised, and this program is mainly targeting women, then that's very difficult to undo. And it looks like a typical kind of quick fix. I mean, sure, there's a problem with the children of addicts. I think there almost certainly is a problem of child abuse and neglect and so on, but this looks like a kind of typical quick fix.
Kate Carnell, do you see this as offering any long-term hope?
I'm horrified, absolutely horrified. People with drug addictions have got a medical problem. We wouldn't try to go around sterilising people with other medical problems. So why are we talking about sterilising these people? I mean, fundamentally, we do need a whole different approach to drug addiction, not just the legal one. And we need to look at better ways to treat people with drug addictions. But I have to say, this is so far off the ethics scale that it's just, it makes me feel sick.
This is, of course, a voluntary scheme. Is there a case for the government to somehow step in here?
But it's not voluntary. If you offer, £200 to somebody who has a drug addiction, who needs the drug, therefore needs the money, how voluntary is that?
So it's coercive.
That's the crazy thing. I mean, the money may well just go straight up their arm, and
it will.
Probably will. Yeah,
that's right.
It's just unacceptable. It's that simple.
All right, let's move on. As the backlash against the draft Murray-Darling report continues, the government has done its usual dance and is now commissioning further impact studies. Well, let's first of all canvass your views on this debate. Is this an issue of the government not consulting before it produces a report? Kate Carnell?
I think it's the worst bit of social change, shall we say, or of policy that I've seen for a very long time. Putting a plan like this just out there that will affect not just farmers but country towns, rural Australia, and sort of say, well, here's the first volume, but all the other volumes aren't available at the moment. The government's saying, oh, look, it's not us, it's somebody else. This is just it's just the most extraordinary approach to try to bring the community with you. It's a way to alienate them before you even start the debate.
It is a draft plan, though. It's getting it out there for discussion. David McKnight?
Well, it is. I mean, when I see this situation, I think Kate's right. It was probably very poorly done, but and I guess I'm a city slicker, but I mean, you look at this situation, you say we have to do something to stop killing the rivers. There's been structural adjustment in all kinds of other sectors of the Australian economy, some without the kind of billions of dollars that are available to be put into these communities. I think that the farmers' fears are pretty exaggerated. We've come through a long drought where the water reductions were far more than what is being proposed. Now, I mean, I know that probably doesn't cut any ice, but the farmers' communities got through that in reasonable shape.
Oh, they didn't really. Look, those country towns, those farmers, those food producers have just been sweating on rain. And the difficult time now is that rain has come so they can have a good year, a good few years, and the government, straight the Murray-Darling Commission, is saying, no, you guys, the norm is what you've been going through over the last few years with significant water restraints. And what a lot of the companies are saying, the food production companies, is we simply won't invest anymore because we can't have the good years. It's a balance, this approach, and the balance isn't there.
Well, it's always a question of balance, and I mean, whenever something like this happens, I mean, I don't think people got their knickers in a knot about the clothing and textile workers. There was not the support for them. I mean, I really think that their fears are exaggerated. They're being pumped up. I mean, the people who designed the plan and put through the legislation, which is the former government, are now fueling those fears, and it's just not a good way to try and get policy reform, I don't think.
I think it's a dreadful way to get policy reform. But look, 150,000 people work in rural Australia in food production or food manufacturing alone. It's those sort of jobs that will simply go, along with farm jobs. And a lot of those small country towns rely on those. The towns will simply die.
Well, I think this is something that we're going to hear a lot about in the coming weeks and months, and it seems consultation is the name of the day, particularly with that decision over the Afghan asylum, the asylum seekers in South Australia too. But Kate Carnell, David McKnight, thank you so much for joining us on Newsmakers this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks.